My sister ruined my wedding dress for a Halloween party, and my parents congratulated her. So I filed an insurance claim, shut the door in their faces, and let the fraud department take everything she owned. My sister wore my wedding dress to a Halloween party. Not a cheap replica, not a thrift store find inspired by it. My actual, custom-fitted wedding dress. The one I had kept meticulously sealed in a breathable garment bag in the back of my hall closet, wrapped in acid-free tissue paper that still smelled faintly of the downtown Seattle bridal boutique where I'd cried the day I found it. She didn't just casually put it on. She wore it out, partied in it, and posed in it for the entire internet to see. 52 photos. Different angles, different filters, different dramatic, attention-seeking captions. In one shot, she stood on a stranger's porch with fake theatrical blood smeared across her cheek, one hand on her hip, smiling like she was starring on the cover of a bridal magazine. In another, she held a plastic pumpkin bucket filled with mini liquor bottles, looking over her shoulder while her friends flooded the comments with things like literal queen and best costume of the night, hands down. My mother commented, stunning, absolutely gorgeous. My father wrote, she pulls it off better anyway. I didn't cry. I didn't rage text her. I didn't call my parents and scream into the receiver. I said absolutely nothing. At 8:41 the next morning, I called my homeowner's insurance company. At 8:56 a.m., I filed a comprehensive claim for severely damaged and contaminated formal wear, adding a specific clause for the unauthorized use, handling, and theft of a stored, insured item. At 9:03 a.m., my sister texted me, "Why the hell is there a damage invoice and liability notice in my email for $6,250? I stared at the message while my morning coffee cooled in my hands. The morning sunlight fell across my kitchen counter, warm and entirely ordinary, as if this were just another standard Thursday, and not the first morning of the absolute, total war my family had spent decades practically begging for. I set my mug down, sat at the dining table, and let myself take one long, deep breath before typing back. Because you stole my wedding dress and wore it to a Halloween party. The typing bubble appeared immediately. Are you insane? It was just sitting there. Mom said you wouldn't even care because the wedding is delayed. That text made me go completely still. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even shocked. I was just profoundly, deeply still. It's the exact feeling you get when something ugly and toxic finally takes a solid shape you can actually touch. Because that text was my entire family dynamic summarized in one single sentence. It wasn't just the casual cruelty of it. It was the absolute certainty, the unwavering confidence that I existed solely to absorb whatever impact they wanted to inflict, and that I would just smile and take it like I always did. My name is Clara. I'm 31 years old. I work as the operations director for a mid-sized tech logistics company. I own a beautiful little townhouse, and I am engaged to a wonderfully patient, grounded man named Julian. Until Julian met my family, he genuinely believed that people on the internet exaggerated when they talked about toxic family dynamics. I learned a very long time ago how to be the quiet, reliable, invisible one. My sister, Chloe, is 28. She has spent her entire life treating other people's boundaries like personal insults. Chloe is beautiful in that very obvious, striking way that people tend to reward early in life. She has big eyes, a bright smile, and an effortless, manipulative charm that she turns on the second she wants something. Growing up, she broke my things, borrowed my things without asking, and lost my things. And somehow, she always ended every single disaster with someone else apologizing to her, usually me. When we were teenagers, she took my favorite cashmere sweater, the one I had saved up for months to buy, stretched it out, and returned it smelling like cheap vanilla perfume and stale cigarette smoke. When I got upset and complained, Mom just sighed, rolled her eyes, and said, "Clara, stop being so dramatic. She just admires your style. Take it as a compliment." When Chloe borrowed my first car during my sophomore year of college and scraped the entire passenger side against a concrete pillar in a parking garage, Dad just laughed. He patted her on the shoulder and said, "Hey, that's what insurance is for, right? Don't cry, kiddo." I was the one left paying the deductible. When she accidentally, on purpose, announced my massive promotion at a family dinner by saying, Well, it's not like Clara has a social life or a boyfriend right now, so at least she has her spreadsheets. Everyone at the table chuckled. I sat there, gripping my napkin under the table, forcing a smile so I wouldn't be accused of ruining dessert. That was our rhythm. That was the established law of our household. Chloe did whatever she wanted. My parents polished her awful behavior into something harmless and quirky, and I was expected to be gracious, forgiving, and quiet. Julian noticed it long before I was ready to admit it out loud. The very first time he came to dinner at my parents' house, Chloe spent 20 solid minutes flirting with him right in front of my face. It wasn't subtle. She kept putting her hand on his forearm, leaning in way too close to whisper things, laughing too loudly at his polite jokes, and asking him pointed questions about whether he preferred women who were spontaneous and fun over women who were rigid. I remember freezing in my chair, looking at my parents, waiting for them to intervene. Mom just smiled dreamily into her wine glass. Dad completely ignored it and asked Julian about the football game. On the drive home that night, Julian kept one hand on the steering wheel and reached over to cover my hand with his. "Has she always done that?" he asked, his voice careful but firm. "Yes," I said, staring straight ahead. "And has everyone always just acted like it's completely normal?" I looked out the passenger window at the red brake lights smeared across the dark, rain-slicked highway. Also yes. Julian was quiet for a long moment. "Clara, that isn't harmless teasing. That's pure hostility with good lighting." I laughed, feeling a lump form in my throat. Because Julian had this incredible way of putting things so plainly that it instantly cut through 20 years of gaslighting and fog. But even then, I wasn't quite ready to blow up my family over it. Then, I got engaged. Julian proposed in early spring at a stunning private botanical conservatory where we had gone for our third date. It was quiet, simple, and absolutely perfect. I cried happy tears. An older couple nearby realized what was happening and clapped for us. It was the happiest day of my life. When we called my parents to tell them the news, Mom screamed so loudly into the receiver, I had to pull the phone away from my ear. But when we told Chloe, her reaction was entirely different. She stared at the custom vintage ring on my finger, her eyes narrowing for just a fraction of a second, and said, "Wow, I honestly didn't think he was actually going to do it. You guys are so domestic." Then she plastered on a fake smile and hugged me way too tightly. From that exact moment onward, my wedding became a stage that Chloe couldn't stand not being the center of. She aggressively inserted herself into every single detail. She had loud, unsolicited opinions on the venue, the floral arrangements, the catering, and the cake, despite the fact that she wasn't contributing a single dime to the budget. She criticized my carefully curated guest list, complained about the color palette, mocked my choice of shoes, and told me my hair trial made me look like a tired pioneer woman. When I finally found the dress, she demanded to see the photos. She stared at my phone screen for a long time before handing it back. "It's gorgeous. Very you." "Thank you," I said, already bracing myself for the inevitable insult, wrapped inside the compliment. She tilted her head, feigning innocence. "I just mean, it's very classic, safe, kind of serious and matronly, you know?" Julian, who was sitting right beside me on the couch, didn't miss a beat. He muttered, "Unlike a clown car on fire, which I assume would be your bridal vibe, Chloe." I laughed so hard I nearly dropped my phone. Chloe glared at him, her face flushing, and the tension in the room thickened into something suffocating. Things only got worse. Chloe demanded to come to my final fitting. I said no. She wanted to post sneak peek photos of my dress on her Instagram before I did. I told her absolutely not. She asked to borrow my custom-made, hand-beaded veil for a styled bridal photo shoot she wanted to do with a friend who was an aspiring online makeup artist. "No," I said, my voice hard. She pouted, crossing her arms like a toddler. "God, Clara, you are being such a controlling bridezilla. You're sucking all the fun out of this." I looked at her, across my mother's kitchen island, the afternoon sunlight catching the gold hoop in her ear, and thought, "You say weddings like there are going to be multiple of mine." Mom immediately swooped in to protect her golden child. She touched my arm and stressed, "Clara, honey, don't be so sharp with your sister. She just wants to be involved." Sharp. That was always the exact word they used to describe me, whenever I refused to melt on command and let them walk all over me. A month before Halloween, Julian and I had to make the brutal decision to postpone the wedding. Not cancel, postpone. We had a massive, unexpected plumbing leak in our townhouse that destroyed our hardwood floors, forcing us to reshuffle our savings for emergency repairs. A week later, Julian's father found out he needed an emergency quadruple bypass surgery. It was nothing apocalyptic, just heavy, expensive, stressful life arriving all at once. We sat down, looked at our depleted energy levels, and decided to push the wedding to late spring so we could actually breathe and enjoy it. I was deeply disappointed, but honestly, mostly relieved. I carefully packed my gorgeous $6,250 silk and lace gown back into its protective bag, laid fresh, acid-free tissue paper over the delicate bodice, zipped it shut, and hung it safely in the very back of my hall closet. 2 weeks later, Chloe came by the townhouse, supposedly to drop off some homemade soup Mom had made. She hugged me, told me that postponing the wedding was honestly probably for the best because you looked really stressed and it was aging you, and then proceeded to wander aimlessly through my home with that restless, invasive curiosity of hers. She touched my mail, picked up picture frames, and poked around. At one point, I caught her lingering near the hallway closet, staring at the door. I should have known right then. After a lifetime of this, I always should have known. Halloween night fell on a Tuesday. Julian and I decided to stay in. We ordered expensive Thai takeout, lit some autumn candles, and watched old, cheesy 80s horror movies on the couch. My phone buzzed a few times around midnight, but I was exhausted and ignored it, leaving it on the charger in the kitchen. The next morning, I woke up at 7 a.m., poured a cup of coffee, and finally checked my phone. I had 24 unread notifications. The first was a text from a girl I went to college with. "Clara, please tell me that is not your actual wedding dress." The second was a screenshot. The third was a direct link to Chloe's Instagram page. I clicked the link, and I felt my stomach drop so fast and so violently that it was a physical ache. I stopped breathing. There she was, Chloe, standing in the middle of a massive, crowded house party, wearing my wedding dress. My dress. The pristine ivory silk was violently wrinkled and bunched at the waist. The delicate hand-stitched hem was completely gray, caked with wet mud and dirt. Someone had intentionally splashed fake, sticky theatrical blood across the left side of the skirt, and from the high-definition close-up shots she posted, I could clearly see that the vintage lace near the sleeves had been aggressively stretched and torn. In 3 of the photos, she was standing outside on a wet, leaf-covered patio, dragging the train through the muck. In another photo, she was holding a bright red, sticky-looking cocktail in a plastic cup, and I could clearly see red droplets splashed right against the silk bodice. The caption read, "Till death do us party. Decided to put this dress to good use, since it was just collecting dust. Hashtag runaway bride, hashtag Halloween icon, hashtag oops." And then I read the comments. Her friends were fawning over her, calling her a genius and a fashion icon. But the ones that made my blood run entirely cold were from my parents. My mother, "Stunning, you look so beautiful, honey." My father, "She pulls it off better anyway." I sat on one of my kitchen bar stools, staring at the screen. I didn't cry. I didn't throw my phone. Instead, I felt something deep inside my chest harden into absolute, impenetrable ice. It was a feeling I had never experienced before in my entire life. It wasn't heartbreak. It wasn't even outrage. It was pure, unadulterated clarity. Julian walked into the kitchen, his hair messy from sleep, rubbing his eyes. He took one look at my face and froze. "Clara, what happened? What's wrong?" I didn't say a word. I just turned the phone around and handed it to him. Julian scrolled through the photos in complete silence. I watched a muscle in his jaw feather and tighten. His eyes darkened as he swiped through the images, taking in the mud, the fake blood, the torn lace. When he finally reached the comments and read my father's words, he looked up at me. His voice was dangerously quiet. "Tell me exactly what you need me to do." That simple sentence nearly broke me. Not because I didn't know what to do, but because for the absolute first time in my 31 years of life, I knew exactly what I was going to do. "I'm not calling them," I said, my voice shockingly steady. "Good," Julian replied. "I'm not arguing with her. I'm not screaming. I'm not doing the back and forth dance. Even better." I inhaled slowly, feeling the ice in my chest lock into place. I'm filing a police report for theft, and I'm filing an insurance claim for the maximum property damage. Julian's expression instantly shifted from furious anger to a look of profound, almost reverent pride. That, he said softly, is incredibly hot. So, I did it. I called my insurance provider. I was connected to a remarkably calm, efficient claims adjuster named Sarah. Sarah asked me a series of very careful, specific questions in a neutral, professional tone. Was the garment stored securely inside your primary residence? Yes. Was the item removed from the residence and utilized without your explicit knowledge or authorization? Yes. Is there visible, documented damage to the item? Yes, severe damage. Can you provide the original purchase receipts, alteration invoices, photographic evidence of the item prior to the incident, and the social media evidence documenting the unauthorized use and damage? Yes, I said, to every single question. I had the original boutique receipt. I had the $800 alteration invoice. I had pristine photos from my final fitting. And I had meticulously screenshotted every single one of Chloe's posts, every comment, and timestamped images from my friend who had sent them to me, just in case Chloe suddenly realized what she had done and deleted everything. Sarah typed rapidly on her end of the line. Thank you, Clara. We will open a formal claim for the garment. This will include estimates for specialized biocleaning, structural restoration, and full replacement evaluation if the item is deemed a total loss. Because the item was removed and damaged by an identifiable third party without your consent, our subrogation department will direct the liability notice and the financial demand directly to that individual. Her name is Chloe Hall, I said. My voice didn't waver once. I can provide her home address, her phone number, and her email address. At 9:03 a.m., the liability notice hit Chloe's inbox, and my phone lit up with her panicked text. After I replied, "Because you stole my wedding dress and wore it to a Halloween party," she immediately fired back. "You are being a literal psycho. It was one night. Mom literally said you weren't even using it and that you wouldn't care." There it was again. The golden shield. Mom said. I didn't respond. I put my phone on Do Not Disturb, opened my laptop, and started my workday. By noon, my phone log showed that my mother had called me 8 times. My father had called 3 times. Chloe had called 17 times. At 12:17 p.m., Mom finally left a voicemail. I played it on speakerphone while Julian made sandwiches for lunch. "Clara, this has gone way, way too far. I just got off the phone with Chloe, and she is hyperventilating. It was just a costume. She was just trying to lighten the mood because everybody has been so depressed about the wedding being postponed. Honestly, you should be flattered she chose your dress. She looked beautiful in it. And now she's absolutely hysterical because she got some terrifying legal email from an insurance company demanding over $6,000. Call me back immediately and fix this. Fix it right now, Clara. Fix it." Always that exact phrase. Always my responsibility to clean up the messes they made on my floor. At 1:05 p.m., Dad texted me. "Family doesn't do this to family. Cancel the claim, now." I actually laughed out loud in my kitchen. At 1:11 p.m., I typed my one and only reply to him. "Family doesn't break into a bride's house, steal her wedding dress, ruin it in the mud, and applaud each other for it on the internet. Do not contact me again unless it is to apologize." I turned my phone face down and went back to my spreadsheets. That evening, at exactly 6:30 p.m., there was a violent, frantic pounding on my front door. Julian was standing at the stove, plating the pasta he had just made. He froze, looked toward the hallway, and then looked at me. His eyes were hard. "Do you want me to get rid of them?" Because of course, it was them. They couldn't stand being ignored. "No," I said, wiping my hands on a towel. "I want to handle this, but I want you standing right there, as a witness." I walked to the front door and pulled it open. Chloe was standing on my porch, her face flushed scarlet, her mascara slightly smeared from crying. Mom was standing right behind her, looking frantic and deeply offended, clutching her purse like a shield. Dad was hovering in the background near the driveway, hands in his pockets, looking like a man who wanted to watch the execution, but didn't want to be the one to pull the lever. Chloe shoved her phone directly into my face. The screen displayed the PDF from the insurance company. "Withdraw this right now," she shrieked, her voice echoing in the quiet neighborhood. I didn't flinch. I didn't step back. No. "You insane, bitter bitch," Chloe screamed, stepping forward. She stopped abruptly when she glanced past my shoulder and saw Julian stepping into the entryway, his arms crossed over his chest, looking at her like she was a bug on the bottom of his shoe. Chloe looked at him, her eyes wide. Julian, are you seriously letting her do this to me? Julian didn't raise his voice, but the absolute disgust in his tone was devastating. I'm not letting Clara do anything. She's a grown woman handling a theft. You should try acting like an adult sometime. I hear it builds character. Mom gasped, clutching her pearls. Literally. Julian, that is incredibly disrespectful. So is stealing a woman's wedding dress, Linda, Julian snapped back. Mom turned her watery, victim mode eyes on me. Clara, please. You filed a financial claim against your own flesh and blood over a piece of fabric. I filed a claim for stolen and severely damaged property, I corrected her, my voice eerily calm. Dad finally stepped up onto the porch, scowling. That bill is outrageous, Clara. $6,000 for a dress? You're out of your mind. I looked him dead in the eye. The dress cost $5,450. The custom alterations cost $800. It actually costs more than what they're currently billing her for. Dad blinked, genuinely taken aback. Because, of course, none of them had ever bothered to ask about my life, my finances, or my wedding. Things simply appeared beautiful and organized around me, and they just assumed that beauty was free and effortless because it belonged to me, the workhorse of the family. Chloe threw her hands in the air, exasperated. Oh my God, it's not even permanently damaged. It literally just needs a dry cleaning. You're being so dramatic. I pulled my own phone out of my pocket and read from the preliminary assessment the bridal specialist had sent me an hour ago. It has deep-set mud ground into the silk hem. The vintage lace on the left sleeve is physically torn. There is heavy makeup transfer on the collar, permanent alcohol staining on the bodice, and the fake blood you used contains synthetic red dye that has chemically contaminated the silk fibers. I had it assessed by the original designer. Chloe stared at me, her mouth opening and closing. You had it assessed already? Yes. Mom looked stricken, stepping forward. You moved that fast? Clara, why are you doing this? I met my mother's gaze, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel the need to shrink to make her comfortable. You all moved faster. You stole it, ruined it in one single night, and publicly congratulated each other on the internet before I even woke up to drink my coffee. The silence that followed was thin, fragile, and crackling with electricity. Then, Chloe let out a high, ugly, defensive laugh. I know what this is. You're doing all of this because Dad said I wore it better. You're just jealous and insecure. That was the mistake Chloe always made. She genuinely thought that vanity was the deepest cut, because vanity was the only lens through which she viewed the entire world. Surface first, ego first, applause first. You really think this is about who looked better? I asked quietly. She rolled her eyes, crossing her arms. Please, you've always been jealous of me. Julian let out a sharp, genuine laugh from behind me. The delusion here should legitimately be studied in a lab. Mom shot him a venomous look, but I never took my eyes off my sister. This isn't about your pathetic need for attention, Chloe, I said, my voice dropping an octave. This is about the fact that you walked into my private home, went into my closet, took something incredibly expensive and emotionally irreplaceable, destroyed it, posted it online for strangers to validate you, and felt entirely entitled to praise for it. This is about the fact that Mom and Dad saw you do it, and instead of telling you to take it off, they cheered you on. This is about all three of you deciding, for the 10,000th time in my life, that I am not a person with rights or boundaries. I am just the punching bag you expect to absorb the impact of your actions. Dad scoffed, shaking his head. Jesus, Clara, that's so dramatic. You're analyzing this to death. It was just a joke for Halloween. I looked at the man who had raised me. You told the entire internet that she wore my wedding dress better. That wasn't a joke, Dad. That was a confession of exactly how you view me. For the first time in 31 years, nobody had a quick, dismissive comeback. Chloe recovered first, her face twisting into an ugly sneer. Fine. You want money so badly? I'll pay for the stupid dry cleaning, and we can stop pretending you're some tragic victim. She reached into her expensive designer purse. The claim is already active, Chloe, I said. I don't own the debt anymore. The insurance company does. You can pay them. Her face went pale. Then call them and cancel it. No. Mom stepped right up to the threshold, dropping the wounded, tearful act entirely. Her face hardened into the cold, demanding mask I knew so well. Clara, enough. She said she'll pay to clean it. Stop this right now. Why are you being so insanely cruel to your sister? And there it was. The ultimate question underneath every single family conflict I had ever endured. Why won't you just lie down in the shape we prefer? Why are you making it so hard for us to walk all over you? I smiled. A real, genuine smile. And I think that unsettled my mother more than if I had started screaming. Because, Mom, I said softly, I am officially done helping you all abuse me. Dad frowned, stepping forward. What the hell does that mean? It means I have documented everything, I told them. The claim, the texts, the Instagram posts, the comments, the police report for the theft. If Chloe pays what the insurance company demands, great. If she refuses, they will sue her, and I will let them. And going forward, none of you are welcome in my home ever again. Mom looked completely stunned, like I had just slapped her across the face. You cannot be serious. Over a dress? No, I said, stepping back and gripping the door handle. Over a lifetime. That landed. I saw it hit all three of them. Because even if they would never, ever admit it out loud, they knew. They knew about the ruined sweaters, the crashed car, the stolen moments, the little daily humiliations, the constant triangulation, the way every single special moment of my life was handled like an inconvenience or a competition for Chloe to win. Mom's voice turned soft again, manipulative and smooth as silk. Honey, please. Families make mistakes. We love you. I nodded slowly. And healthy people learn from consequences. Goodbye, Mom. Chloe took one aggressive step toward the door, pointing a shaking finger at my face. If you do this, Clara, I swear to God, do not ever expect me to forgive you. I actually laughed out loud. Chloe, you wore my wedding dress to a Halloween party. I don't want your forgiveness. I want your money. I slammed the door in their faces and locked the deadbolt. My hands were shaking violently afterward, not from fear, but from the sheer, overwhelming force of 31 years of unsaid words finally leaving my body all at once. Julian pulled me against his chest in the quiet hallway, wrapping his arms tightly around me while the pasta went completely cold in the kitchen. You okay? He murmured into my hair, kissing the top of my head. I nodded against his chest, then shook my head, then let out a wet, exhausted laugh. I don't know. That's fair, he said, holding me tighter. I leaned back and looked up at him. Julian, do you think I went too far? Should I have just let her pay for the cleaning? He looked honestly, deeply offended by the question. Clara, your sister broke into your house, stole your wedding dress, used it as a prop to get drunk in. Your parents mocked you publicly for it, and you filed a standard insurance claim instead of burning her house to the ground. I'd say you're showing the kind of admirable restraint that qualifies you for sainthood. That made me laugh, until I finally started to cry. The next 2 weeks were absolute, unmitigated chaos. Chloe deleted the original Instagram post the very next morning, but it didn't matter because I had already forwarded the archived files to the insurance investigator. My mother sent me long, sprawling, emotionally manipulative emails about family unity, forgiveness, and how holding grudges causes cancer. My father sent shorter, angrier texts about embarrassment, family reputation, and keeping private matters out of the hands of corporate lawyers. An aunt I barely spoke to called me to say, I'm sure you both have very valid feelings about this misunderstanding. I hung up on her mid-sentence. But there were cracks forming in the old family system. A cousin on my dad's side texted me privately. I saw the photos before she deleted them. That was genuinely psychotic behavior. I always knew she was a brat, but damn, proud of you for standing up to them. And then, my grandmother, my dad's mother, who lived in Florida and never missed a single detail of family gossip, called me. Your mother always did confuse tolerance with permission, Grandma said, her voice raspy from decades of smoking. I sat up straighter on the couch. Grandma? She let that girl become a vandal in lipstick, my grandmother said bluntly. Do not back down, Clara. Stand firm. Let them reap what they sowed. I loved her so much in that moment, I could have cried all over again. But the real explosion happened 3 weeks later, when the insurance company completed its deep dive investigation. And this is where the story goes from a family dispute to absolute spectacular ruin. Sarah, my claims adjuster, called me on a Tuesday morning. "Hi, Clara. We've concluded the subrogation investigation," Sarah said, her professional tone laced with what sounded like mild disbelief. "We are proceeding with the full $6,250 demand against Chloe Hall. However, our fraud and legal department uncovered something else during the social media audit." I frowned, putting the call on speaker so Julian could hear. "What did you find?" "Did you know," Sarah asked carefully, "that the Halloween party your sister attended was actually a sponsored commercial event hosted by a major vodka distributor? It was a citywide costume contest with a cash prize." Julian and I looked at each other, instantly freezing. "No," I said, "I didn't know that." "Yes," Sarah continued, "your sister entered the contest under the theme Nightmare Bride, and she won the grand prize, $10,000. My jaw physically dropped. "Because she utilized stolen, insured property to secure a commercial cash prize," Sarah explained smoothly. "This elevates the situation from simple property damage to commercial fraud and unjust enrichment. Our legal department not only billed her for the full replacement cost of the dress, but we also legally obligated ourselves to notify the corporate sponsor of the contest that the winning entry was achieved using stolen property that is currently under an active insurance claim." The silence in my kitchen was deafening. Julian covered his mouth with his hand, his eyes wide with shock and absolute glee. "What does that mean for Chloe?" I asked, almost afraid to hear the answer. "It means," Sarah said, "that the sponsor has officially disqualified her entry. They have demanded the immediate return of the $10,000 prize money, citing a breach of their terms and conditions regarding illegal acts and stolen property. Combined with our subrogation demand, your sister is currently facing a sudden debt of over $16,000. When I hung up the phone, Julian and I just stared at each other for a solid minute before he walked over to the fridge, pulled out a bottle of champagne we had been saving for our anniversary, and popped the cork. Update 2. When the reality of the situation hit Chloe, she completely lost her mind. She sent me 24 text messages in a row, escalating rapidly from blinding rage to absolute groveling panic. "I cannot afford this. You are literally ruining my life over a piece of fabric. They took the prize money back, Clara. Please fix this. Mom says if you ever loved us, you'd stop this right now. Dad says you're being a vindictive psycho." And then the final message, the one that told me absolutely everything I ever needed to know about my sister. "Please, Clara, I already spent the prize money. I put a massive luxury vacation on my credit card because I thought I had the $10,000, and I thought the dress thing was just free. I'm going to be ruined." Free. That single word sat heavily in my mind like a stone dropped in a pond. My wedding dress, my private home, my peace of mind, my forced silence, my constant forgiveness. To them, it was all just free. I didn't answer her. I took a screenshot of her admitting she spent the money and forwarded it directly to Sarah at the insurance company for their file. A month later, Chloe was backed into a legal corner. Facing a potential lawsuit from a massive insurance conglomerate and a corporate liquor brand, she had to agree to a strict payment arrangement. Because she had already blown the prize money on non-refundable first-class flights and luxury resorts, she had to liquidate her assets to cover the immediate demands. She was forced to sell her beloved, heavily curated collection of designer handbags, the ones she loved to flaunt at family gatherings, and had to sell her nearly new Audi and buy a beat-up 10-year-old Honda Civic to cover the difference. Mom called me, sobbing hysterically, saying the situation was humiliating for the family and that Chloe was deeply depressed. I calmly told my mother, "I call it asset liquidation. Actions have consequences." Dad completely stopped speaking to me after I refused to meet them in the middle and pay half of Chloe's debt. I told him there was no middle ground between being violated and handing out a consequence. Around Christmas, my parents hosted their annual massive family dinner. For the first time in my life, I wasn't invited. And for the first time in my life, it didn't sting the way I thought it would. Julian and I stayed home. We cooked a beautiful roast chicken in our own dining room, with candles lit and soft jazz playing from the speaker. We drank good wine, exchanged small, meaningful gifts, called his parents, who were doing wonderfully after his dad's surgery, and watched the snow turn the Seattle streets silver beyond our windows. At one point, Julian reached across the table, took my hand, and smiled. "You seem lighter." I thought about that for a moment. The absolute truth was, I did. Losing the fantasy of the family I always wished I had hurt deeply, but carrying the reality of the family I actually had was crushing me to death. In January, I took the ruined dress to a master restoration specialist recommended by the boutique. Parts of the dress could be saved through intense chemical cleaning. Parts of it couldn't. The entire hem had to be structurally reconstructed. The vintage lace on the sleeves had to be replaced entirely with a slightly different pattern. The bloodstains had faded to a very faint shadow, but they were still there if you looked closely enough. The consultant, an older woman with kind eyes, looked at me gently. "I can make it beautiful again, Clara, but I have to be honest with you. It won't be the exact same dress." I stood there, resting my hand on the garment bag, and surprised myself by smiling. "That's perfectly okay," I said. "I'm not the exact same bride." In late spring, Julian and I finally got married. We scrapped the massive, stressful event we had originally planned and opted for a much smaller, intimate ceremony in a beautiful glass greenhouse overlooking the water. We had 50 guests. No drama, no tension, just absolute peace. I wore the restored dress. It had new lace at the sleeves and a slightly shorter hem that moved differently when I walked. It was altered by damage, yes, but it was also altered by choice, by repair, and by intention. When I looked at myself in the mirror before walking down the aisle, I didn't think of Chloe. I didn't think of my parents. I thought of survival. I thought of strength. After the reception, while Julian and I were sitting in our hotel suite, eating leftover wedding cake in our pajamas, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. For one brief, stupid second, my heart spiked, thinking it might be Mom reaching out on my wedding day. It wasn't. It was from one of Chloe's old friends, a girl named Tessa, who had been at the Halloween party. "Hey, Clara, you don't know me well, but I got your number from a mutual. I just wanted to say this. What Chloe did to you was absolutely awful. A lot of us at the party told her she was crossing a line, but she laughed it off. She spent months telling everyone you were an evil, overreacting bridezilla who ruined her life. But honestly, you handled it like a total badass. Congratulations on your wedding today." I read the message twice, a slow smile spreading across my face, and then set the phone down on the nightstand. Julian came up behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist and resting his chin on my shoulder. "Good news?" I leaned back into him, feeling completely safe. Just confirmation. Of what? I looked out at the city lights glowing warm against the dark sky, listening to the quiet hum of the city below us. That I wasn't wrong. And that, in the absolute end, was the entire lesson. Not that revenge is sweet, though, honestly, watching the legal system extract accountability from an entitled narcissist is deeply, profoundly satisfying. Not that family always comes around and realizes their mistakes, because sometimes they just double down and choose their golden child forever. Not even that setting boundaries magically fixes everything, because it doesn't. The lesson is that the exact moment you stop volunteering to be mishandled, the people who benefited from your silence will call you cruel. Let them. They were always going to say something terrible about you anyway. You might as well give them a real reason to complain while you live in peace. My sister stole my wedding dress to win a Halloween contest. My mother praised her for it. My father told the world she wore it better. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I said nothing. I just made one single phone call. And for the very first time in my entire life, the bill for the damage finally went to the right person.